Hello and welcome to the first Edgescan Value University 101. We're just going to give a couple of seconds to let everybody join in on this webinar, make sure that we have all of our attendees here. So while we're doing that, while we're letting everybody join, what I'm going to do is just announce our webinar host today, David Kedovic, the head of global engineering, a principal engineer at Edgescan, and Tim Saleck, our senior solutions engineer at Edgescan. Now, my name is Brian Sullivan. I lead business development and partnerships for the Northeast United States here at Edgescan, and I'm proud to say that I'm here to moderate. These two gentlemen have a lot to share with us today, and this is the first in a series of value universities that we will be going through in a little while. So with that, I'm hoping that all of our attendees have been able to join. I'm trying to stall as much as I can, but we'll get the show on the road. Alrighty. So Edgescan Value University 101, and we're going to start out with why Edgescan. Now, to talk about why Edgescan, we first need to understand what it is. Edgescan today is a cloud-based API-first SaaS solution that is designed to end the compromise between scale, depth, visibility, and accuracy. Now, we feel this compromise is made every day across the world by organizations who use a traditional approach to vulnerability management, utilizing multiple siloed point solutions from a plethora of vendors. Now, our service with Edgescan encompasses penetration testing as a service, full stack vulnerability management, API discovery, and attack surface management, all of which are supported by extensive metrics and reporting capabilities from one single platform. The solution combines automation of scanning technology with the expertise of OSCP and CREST certified penetration testers to give our clients false positive free, risk-based vulnerability intelligence that's always reliable and actionable. Now that we know what Edgescan is, we can talk about why our clients use Edgescan. Now, we pride ourselves on the fact that when you get intelligence from Edgescan, whether it be via scanning applications, APIs, hosts, or a manual assessment done by one of our in-house pen testers, you can always be confident that you're going to get actionable data along with a personalized risk score so that you know what's crucial, what to fix first, and most importantly, how to fix it. Now, when you do partner with us, you're adding these pen testers as an extension of your team, and we'll always work with you to make sure that we succeed together. Unlimited scanning, retesting, and validation of vulnerabilities allows all of our organizations and partners to avoid static snapshots of a pen test and show continuous progress towards a more robust vulnerability management program. Now, whether your company deals in software or satellites, Edgescan always does the heavy lifting for you so that your security teams can focus less on managing vulnerability tools and triaging their reports and really focus on improving your risk posture. So now that we've talked a little bit about what Edgescan is and why we should choose Edgescan, right? I'm just going to go into the next segment of this. But before I do that, I'm going to say if anybody has any questions, comments, concerns during this webinar, please feel free to use the question and answer feature on Zoom. And if we don't get to the question by the end of this webinar, we can always send over a note afterwards. Now we're going to go into the next Edgescan Value Universities and just kind of give you guys an outline of what this is going to look like over the next few months. So as you can see here, we currently have outlined 5 Edgescan Value Universities. Today, we're starting with the intro and why Edgescan. We'll then go into development and roadmap. After that, we'll do integrations and innovation. Then we'll go over penetration testing as a service. And finally, our last one scheduled right now is risk prioritization and attack surface management. But don't you worry, there'll be plenty more to come. Now that I've done my bit at the beginning here, we're going to hop into the dashboard. And for that, I'll be handing it off to Tim Saleck. All you, Tim.
All right, thanks, Brian. I'm getting my screen shared out here. All right, so as we all know, as we hit the platform, the default landing page is a dashboard. The intention here is to be a high-level overview, some 10,000-foot level metrics around your estate in Edgescan. So we have high-level metrics like exposure factor, which is the risks to your public-facing estate. We overlay this with the global average in Edgescan, so anomalize, so you can kind of see how you trend versus others. Risk over time, you want to know how you're doing, and if you're heading the right direction, you need to know if you're closing vulnerabilities on time. and that your risk isn't going up, right? You want to know trending analysis. And then mean time to remediate, probably most important metric for cyber and closing vulnerabilities in a timely fashion. You want to be able to see how you're doing again versus time and against the global average here. So as I transition into the asset page, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to David to talk about list pages.
Cool. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, everything in Edgescan is designed as a list page. So a list page is just a simple design concept, really, so that you only need to learn how to use one page from a filtering and from just a general auditing perspective. And once you understand how to use the one page, you'll understand how to apply it everywhere. So you'll notice that the assets page, as well as the vulnerabilities, the ASM and the user page, they're all structured they're very similar. And this is by design, it's on purpose. And the idea is that you just really need to learn how to use one, and you can apply all those principles to each of the pages. So if we have at the very top here, we can see we've got some preset filters, and the filtering across the board in Edgescan is the exact same. It's the exact same system. And that's really just to make it as easy as possible for people to interact with the platform. So that's an important note. But yeah, not too much more on that bit. Tim, do you want to show us how to create an asset? Tim, I think you're muted.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. All right. So yeah, to create an asset, this is a new self-service feature that has been recently released to the as a GA. And to basically do that, you hit the assets page, click on create asset. And then you can do this either individually or in bulk, and we'll show an example of both. So as an individual, I can create an asset. We can call it my first asset. We can select the type. In this case, we're going to choose application, and we're going to choose external facing. We can add our tags at this time if we'd like. So I'm going to add an AWS tag. Let's say maybe a critical tag, and let's say maybe like a business unit tag for finance, let's say. And so the idea here is, again, you can preset what you're going to call it, the tags that be associated with it. You can set the priority. Since this is a finance and critical asset, I'm going to bump that priority up a bit here. And then I'm going to note when I would like my pen testing to start. So I'm going to say, please start in November. Please start pen testing in November. And then for a location, since we are a full stack solution, we need a couple locations here. The first will be the URL that we're going to test against. So https://example.com. And then the second location specifier that we're going to add is going to be the underlying host. So example.com. And we do that. We have our two locations, and again, allowing for the full stack testing of the solution. We'll associate a license with this. We're going to use the advanced license, and we're going to go ahead and create scanning and initiate the scan as on the creation. So when we create that asset, there we go. And we can see that my first asset has been created here. Now, as we walk through the same flow for bulk, we can do the same kind of fashion. You can grab the template preloaded here and download that as well. And I'm going to drag in a pre-populated one here to create a bundle of assets here. Click on create, and off we go. And I think the idea here is when you click into one of these assets, you can kind of see, again, just the status, the pre-populated tags. You can enter in any credential information, and you can initiate your scan as well. All right, and now as we move over to the vulnerabilities tab, kind of like David mentioned, same look and feel as the assets from a page perspective, with all of your pre-populated filters and the ability to save those filters and searches. But as you guys know, again, it's just the high level overview of what it is, where it is, when we found it, and really just mechanisms to prioritize remediation, right? So things like CVSS from NIST, the Edgescan scoring system on a 0 to 5 scale, but more recently, the CISA known exploitability list as well. So we're linking every vulnerability to the CISA list, and again, just kind of prioritizing maybe vulnerabilities that are being actively exploited in the wild as defined by CISA. Now for attack surface management, as we move across to attack surface management, the idea here again, as we know, is to get a continuous view and monitor of our external facing estate. I want to know, what's changing as defined by me. So if I have 30 hosts alive in attack surface management in my external environment, I need to know when that 31st host is popping alive. I need to know when my web server is hosting ports that are not 443 and 80, right? So I need to know if any of this is changing. So ASM is a separate feed from the vulnerability management feed in Edgescan. It is updated every 2 to 4 hours, depending on the number of IPs being monitored. And there's also an element of API discovery in this as well. So for API discovery, we run every endpoint that we find through a series of automated tests, and we determine with a degree of confidence whether an API is existing on that endpoint. In this example here, you can see that I'm sending an open banking request for a list of ATMs to this endpoint. And if I get that list back, I can see with 100% confidence that there is an API in that environment. But the idea here overarching is to know what my external estate is, when it changes, and really just account for that shadow IT, those rogue APIs that are externally facing.
Tim, in the vulnerabilities page, can we jump back there and have a look at, say, how easy is it to initiate a retest?
Oh yes,
something like that.
There. Yes, sir. So yeah, back on vulnerability, something I miss. You can drive into every vulnerability and get more detail. I think we as users are familiar with some of this stuff, but the idea is, again, after you know what it is and why it's real and why it's important to you and how to fix it, you are able to kick these back over the fence individually to the test team or in bulk to the test team and retest a vulnerability either individually from the details page. Or you can do things like retests and edit risk ratings in a bulk from a filter.
Cool. One thing I'd just add about the vulnerabilities is Brian touched on it. A lot of our customers essentially use Edgescan as an extension of their own teams, of their own red teams, pen testing teams, security teams. So we're very cognizant about the vulnerability detail that gets presented, because we understand everybody that works with us doesn't have a decade of pen testing behind them, and they need to get this information in a nice digestible format. So if you click into just one of the vulnerabilities, Tim, any one of them, and we can have a look at some of the detail associated with it. So just a description of what the vulnerability is, and then just the remediation advice. So some remediation advice is really simple, like you need to apply this patch. Whereas some maybe gets a lot more complicated as you get into more deeper into a particular piece of code, especially for certain vulnerabilities like injection-based vulnerabilities. But all the detail will get presented. So you can see at the bottom here, we can see some screenshots, and then if you expand on the CVE and CWE and CIS information, we can see a lot of this detail gets presented here. So not all vulnerabilities will have a CVE, not all vulnerabilities will be CIS control violations, but there's good categorization in Edgescan, so it can just help you be a bit more organized about some of the vulnerabilities and the data you're getting presented. So yeah, no, just to add a little bit of further detail to that, Tim. So
no, cool. Very good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess the last piece that we can mention as well is if any of this is never enough information, you do have access to the team that performs the validation within Edgescan. You're going to be able to get in touch with that person that's doing the validation of the vulnerability. So support the support button in the bottom hand corner if anything's never not enough. I don't understand how you prove this to be real. I don't understand the remediation behind it. It's not as simple as just upgrading the home page. You can always get in touch with the testers performing the validation, get the detail that you need, and then we can get the platform updated accordingly as well.
Great. Tim, when it comes to the vulnerability data, do we have a report that we can present as well? So getting all this information, and I think Brian touched on it, all of this information is available in the UI. It's available via the API, but we always see organizations that I suppose they need to present this reports to their customers. So how can we do that? What does that look like? Can you give us an example of just how to generate a report?
Yeah, so we do have templated reporting available within the platform. You can do that by simply creating the click report button on the right, as we've done here. And then you've got a few options for default templated reports, from a high level overview and summary all the way down to a technical level of detail. You can generate these on any kind of way imaginable, right? Any way I want to slice and dice. But I'm going to go ahead and just click on one and create for all assets. I've already pre-populated and created one for this configuration, the technical detail with all assessed assets over the last 6 months. And once you've created that, you can obviously push and pull and put it on a schedule, send it via email, open it right local as well. But you can kind of see just the breakdown of the templated reporting as well. And then from a non-templated way, obviously we are API first and driven, and there are mechanisms to export in different formats as well, whether it be JSON or CSV, etc. We can get all the information required from the platform in any kind of fashion.
That's cool. Well, one thing that's actually we haven't really talked that much about it, but about a year ago, people were asking us, "Hey, I just like to get a report sent to me every Monday. Is that possible?" So the development team created this beautiful system to send reports, and as soon as they finished it, they realized actually we're going to release it for any piece of data in the platform. So it doesn't have to be reports; it can just be scheduled exports. So instead of just having a report sent, maybe you want to have a certain data set sent. Maybe you want to have an asset list, maybe unupdated hosts from an external ASM perspective, or maybe you want to have a list of vulnerabilities sent to a certain person, dependent on time of day, whatever it is. So that was a really interesting piece that was added into the platform. So you can essentially, anything you can export, you can schedule to be exported. So instead of pulling together a report on a Monday morning in order to present it, you can just schedule it and say, email it to me every Monday morning at 8 o'clock. So something along those lines. So it's a really, really neat piece. Cool. Can you give us an example, Tim, of an event? So we've talked a little bit about how you can kind of interact with the platform, how you can create retests, create assets, but I suppose events are one of the most important components in Edgescan, because it's not a SOAR platform, but it has a lot of SOAR capabilities. So some of those capabilities are just sending an email when something happens, or sending a webhook to a certain location when something happens. So can you give us an example, maybe, Tim, of sending a webhook into ServiceNow when a vulnerability is opened? So just something simple.
Yeah, so in our demo platform here, I got a few examples of events already pre-populated. One of those is a webhook on any vulnerability open across any asset, and we are sending that webhook through ServiceNow. So the idea is I can configure the type of event I want to send. I have your traditional mechanisms to send those, like email and SMS, but one of the more popular and newer ways to do that would be via webhook. And we have some pre-populated templates, ServiceNow in this example, but we also have a few others ranging from just a default JSON template, but we have Slack and Teams, ServiceNow in this example. And the idea here is anytime that a vulnerability is open across any asset that is at least a medium risk or higher, we're going to send the event over to ServiceNow with a specific payload or pre-configured payload information.
Cool. And you can edit all the templates for that are mustache templates. So if you don't like our template, you can just design your own. It's plain and simple. We'll even help you. So yeah, that's an important component as well. Cool. Can we jump into users briefly, and we'll kind of cover it off at a high level, because users is how people access the platform is always important. And I suppose nowadays with so many different ways of interacting with these type of platforms, we have a lot of support for a single sign-on, so you can just manage it all via your existing SSO provider. But for the most part, it's in the basics here. Edgescan is RBAC, role-based access control. So you can be really granular on what controls you give people. So maybe for some users, you only want them to be able to view everything. You don't want them to be able to do state changing actions like editing credentials, deleting credentials, risk accepting vulnerabilities, starting scans, things like that. Maybe you don't want to do that. So you can be really, really granular on the permissions you give different users. But yeah, just not going to dig too much into it. Lots of MFA supported, lots of things here as well. So yeah, not going to dig too much into that, but cool. Will we cover off some of the additional ways to kind of interact with the platform? That was a really nice overview, Tim, as well. So it really is 101. There's an awful lot more, but we covered off some of the most important interactions that happen in the platform.
Yeah, I think for the integrations, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we'll just transition back over to the deck for that.
Cool.
And I do want to remind anybody in attendance, we do have the question and answer function on Zoom here. So I know we've covered a lot. We've gone over, some users and reporting and lists and all that stuff. So please, if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them into Q&A. And we have some time set aside at the end of this to address any, immediate concerns, questions, anything you guys want to know. So just want to set that as a reminder, and I'll hand it right back to Tim to talk about integration. And
if we don't get to the questions, we will send over a summary to everybody afterwards. So put your questions in. We might not answer them immediately, but we'll send you a breakdown of the questions asked anyway. So that's no problem. Something that's really important. It's kind of a barrier to a lot of security tooling and a lot of security solutions is that when organizations start working with Edgescan, Edgescan is providing vulnerability data. It's a really, really good vulnerability data. It's also providing attack surface management data and just overall pen testing data, vulnerability scanning data, lots of data. It's all good verified data. And what's happening really is this data is being plugged usually into an existing workflow in some shape or form. You've typically utilized similar data before in the past. Maybe you want to upgrade your tooling, or maybe you want to upgrade your data feeds. And what we found is that in order for Edgescan to, I suppose, gracefully be rolled out into an organization, it's really a merging of ecosystems. So your ecosystem, what we're doing is we're plugging the Edgescan data into your ecosystem. And how does that happen? So Tim showed us a great example of sending data into ServiceNow, but that's really just one way of interacting. There's lots of different technologies, lots of different platforms we can interact with, and there's lots of different use cases associated with that. So the likes of Slack and ServiceNow, or well, the likes of Slack and Microsoft Teams, you might just want to send a certain notification to a certain team member or a certain team if something happens. Or in, say, Freshworks or Freshdesk and ServiceNow and Jira, maybe you want to open up a ticket or something along those lines if a certain thing happens. Or maybe you're using like a data aggregator, like say Risk Sensor, Kenna or something like that, or Defect Dojo, these type of technologies, and you want to feed the verified data into these platforms. So that's something you can do as well. And then just kind of some of the last interactions we want to cover off. We have some really new, really cool innovations that we'll talk about more in the next session. But the likes of, say, Microsoft Azure, AWS, and then the Google Cloud, GCP, there's ways that we've developed so that we can interact with your cloud environments and pull out everything that is public facing and automatically enroll those into attack surface management and vulnerability scanning. So when something shows up and it becomes live, all of a sudden, it's automatically brought into Edgescan, and then Edgescan is running ASM on it. And what we found is a lot of organizations are utilizing that because they've got lots of different, say, AWS accounts, and they've got them spread out all over the world and lots of different teams all over the world, and they need a better way to coordinate and organize some of that. So some of the cloud integrations have been really welcomed when it comes to providing a solution here. But yeah, I'm not going to talk too much more onto this. There are 2 other slides we've got here, and really it's just a kind of a summary of everything we talked about today. So we covered a lot. There's an awful lot, and some of it was in a lot of detail. Some of it was very high level. So the likes of dashboards, we talked a little bit about global metrics, and then MTTR. Global metrics, a really important component. We tell everybody to try get below the dotted line. So the global metrics is a list basically of anonymized vulnerability data, and it's presented by for all Edgescan customers. And you can see if you're above or below the line when it comes to are you fixing vulnerabilities faster than peer organizations. So that's a good way to kind of benchmark yourself. And then we covered off in the assets page, what is a list page, how to create assets in bulk. In vulnerabilities, we talked a little bit about the CISA KEV list, so the CISA known exploitable vulnerabilities list. And then we talked a little bit about the testing team and how they verify all the vulnerabilities. And that's one of the most important things we do, because getting clean vulnerability data rather than just raw scanner output is just it just makes it so much friendlier when you're presenting this information to your internal teams. You're not sending them off on wild goose chases, things like that. So it's really important. And then retesting vulnerabilities. It's all well and good fixing vulnerabilities, but you want to get a third party to independently verify that the fix is taken and it's worked and your remediations are good. So we encourage people to use the retest button. Then ASM, we talked a little bit about ASM and a little bit about API discovery. So when we're doing ASM, we already know what ports and services are exposed on your external environments. And what we want to do is do additional checks on top of that to look for APIs and different pieces of technology that may be exposed. We found a lot of organizations have a lot more APIs than they think. And that's as soon as we start doing API discovery for organizations, it's a little bit of an eye-opener for people. Tim generated some sample reports. So one thing that's worth kind of noting on this is that Appendix A in our reports, it gives a methodology, a testing methodology. And a lot of people will wonder what sort of testing you're doing. It's highly detailed in the report. So just generate a report, have a look, and you'll understand exactly what sort of testing we're doing. We had a look at some of the events. So sending a webhook into ServiceNow, super important, lots of different ways of interacting, but just essentially an event is our notifications, alerts, and they're all based on a trigger. You decide the trigger, you decide when you want to get notified. A little bit on role-based access control and single sign-on. So we support all the typical providers, Azure AD, Okta, things like that. So just once it's a modern SAML 2 implementation, we can support it. And then we talked a little bit about just how Edgescan fits into some of the modern, I suppose, security ecosystems that organizations have. So yeah, just Tim and Brian, have I missed anything?
I don't believe so. It was pretty good coverage. Thank you, David. I very much appreciate that summary. And then does our next slide go into the questions? Or do you have more to share, David?
That's all I've got today. That's all I've got today, Brian.
Beauty. So I'm going to take this back by the reins and do our last little piece of this first Edgescan Value 101. We do have some questions that came in over the course of the webinar. So this first question that I'm going to ask, okay, is directed at both you guys, whoever would like to answer it. Tim, I'll give you first dabs at it if you'd like. The first question comes from Testing McKenzie, which is, I don't see a users tab in my application. Why is that?
Yeah, so only the super users for the Edgescan platform are going to have access to that users tab. So you're going to have to get in touch with the point of contact for whoever's managing the Edgescan platform within your org.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That was beautiful. So then we have another one by an anonymous attendee that says, when you guys say that we can speak with the tester who ran the report, what do you actually mean by that?
Yeah, I'll jump on this one. So the Edgescan penetration testing team, there's like, I think nearly 60 people there, and they're all seasoned pen testers. And when they're performing the verification and they're taking out the scan results and they're verifying the pen testing results, all of this information, when all that information is going into the platform, we'll do our best to get the person who actually performed the test for you to talk through some of the vulnerabilities. Now, they may not always be available. Pen testers take holidays too. So we have lots of people that can talk you through all of the vulnerabilities that get presented. So if we can't get the actual person who presented a particular vulnerability, we'll certainly make sure there's capable representatives.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much, David. And that is something I talk about a lot, is the quality of support at Edgescan. But moving on to our next question. For the cloud, in parentheses, Azure, and ServiceNow integrations, are there guides or demos available?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the short answer is no. As of right now, there is not. We've got a little bit of collateral available for it. And over the next few weeks, we're going to start producing more user guides, more user information, and just generally making it more accessible for people. So as of right now, we've got very little. You can email and we'll send you over what we have. But in the next few weeks, you'll start to get a lot more detail about it, and a lot more information will be available on the site and will be available to all the Edgescan folks.
Thank you, David. And I mean, that goes for standing a lot with us. I mean, we have these Edgescan Value Universities. We're really trying to ramp up and get as much information about Edgescan out there as we possibly can for our users. But moving on, we do have 3 questions left if anybody wants to sneak any more in. Next question is, does Edgescan provide business risk against the vulnerabilities?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer, because business risk is different. It's contextual. Every single business has a slight difference, I suppose, in the actual business risk. What we can do is, our customers, you can prioritize your assets. And then the Edgescan testing team can look at the vulnerability, look at the context and say, well, look, this particular vulnerability, it's maybe exposing data, and maybe it's on a site that's important. It contains customer information. All that context will be taken into account and will be applied during the verification phase. So risk is kind of contextual, but the Edgescan testing team are going to take it in relative isolation, but then we can look at applying that, maybe the priority of an asset, to take that into account as well. Some organizations, they maybe, like, say, organizations where they have a lot of IP, like media organizations, they care a lot about crypto. So, and a lot of other organizations don't. Plain and simple, they don't care that much about it. It requires nation state maybe resources to really exploit it. But then when you're a really large organization, you do have nation state resources available for the people that are trying to exploit you. So what they've done is they've asked the testing team, anytime certain crypto vulnerabilities are presented in the platform, they're automatically critical or high risk. Whereas the testing team may have said, okay, well, look, it's probably only a medium risk, or maybe it's a high in certain instances, but they've just asked that we just increase the risk based on, because they've said that these vulnerabilities are more important to the business, so we want to increase the risk on them. So there's lots of different ways to do it. Quite difficult to do it in an entirely automated fashion, but if you have certain types of vulnerabilities that you want to make sure get maybe increased in risk, just let the team know. The testing team can handle all of this.
Fantastic. All right, so perfect. So we do have a few more questions and we're running short on time. So I'm actually going to, Tim, if you could do me a favor and pull that demo back up. I'm going to ask David a question, and then we have somebody asking you to re-demonstrate something in the platform. So David, my question for you is there an SSO integration with Azure AD for access? And then we'll move on to Tim and he can show us how to save filters in the platform. But first, I'll go to you, David, for the SSO integration with Azure AD for access.
Easy answer, yes. Yes, there is.
Beautiful. And then Tim, could you just really quickly show us how to save filters in the platform?
Absolutely. So as you can see back in the platform, on the assets tab or on the vulnerability, let's do on the vulnerabilities tab, we will do just an example name. like Heartbleed, oldie but a goodie. And if I want to save this filter, I can save the filter, and I can call it Heartbleed. And then I will have that in my save filters, and I have the ability to pin that to my start or to my vulnerabilities menu as a favorite as well. One other thing, as far as vulnerabilities go, we do have the ability to risk accept, retest, and do things like different actions from the platform, either in bulk from a filter or individually from an actual vulnerability itself. So across the top here, you can do things like edit risk ratings, you can bulk risk accept, you can reopen if you need to, and from an individual perspective, you can drive into these vulnerabilities and absolutely edit the risk rating, perform a retest, things of that nature.
Beauteous. Thank you very much, Tim. And this actually kind of works out since you have the demo already.
Oh.
How does the retesting on demand work, and how quick is the turnaround on a retest?
I'll take that one.
Beauteous.
I got some metrics off the ops team a while ago, and I think on average it takes about 4 hours. In some instances, on the longer ones, it takes about 24 hours. But I think it's usually within about an hour, a couple of hours if it's in a business day. So it's pretty quick. You'll usually have nearly all the time you'll have results at least the next day.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Alrighty, guys. And with that, unless anybody can sneak one more question in, we are coming up to our last question. So, can we risk accept vulnerabilities?
Yes, we can. Risk accepting vulnerabilities is it's a particular permission that can be applied to certain users within the platform. Not all users have it by default. It is auditable. It's important that it's auditable because it disappears from the reports. Mm-hmm. And when you risk accept a vulnerability, whoever risk accepted it, they have to provide a reason, plain and simple. They have to provide a reason why it's risk accepted. Then all the information associated with it, the date, their name, and the reason is all associated with that vulnerability. And then the vulnerability moves from, so the typical states of a vulnerability are like open or closed, but you can also have a risk accepted state. So a vulnerability moves into that risk accepted state, and then all the information associated with it gets stored, but it gets pushed into that risk accepted state, and then you can filter by that in the platform if you wish to see that.
Perfect. And then we did just get one more question snuck in, so we'll call this our final one for the day, gentlemen. I thank you very much. But the question is, can we configure our own SLAs in the Edgescan platform?
Yeah, SLAs are a relatively new feature. So we kind of didn't cover them off today, but the SLAs are the idea of if internally you've agreed with all your business units that you're going to close a critical risk vulnerability in 7 days, you can track that. So the idea is I want to set a rule in the platform where I can say create an SLA for critical risk vulnerabilities of 7 days. So then anytime a vulnerability of critical is still open after 7 days, it'll get a flag on it. And then you can have that flag presented in your reports, like SLA is violated or something along those lines as well. But yes, it's very much so. Some organizations want, maybe they just want the ability to push a little bit more urgency onto certain teams. So yes, that's exactly why the SLA violations have been added into the platform. And there's links in the knowledge base to the deep user docs for how to use SLAs, because they're a really neat feature, but there's an awful lot in them. So just have a look at it, and definitely read the manual when it comes to SLA violations.
All right, thank you so much, David. And if I could ask one final favor from you, could you pull up that one Edgescan Value University slide just to close this out, just so we can show everybody what we have coming up over the next few weeks, few months?
Yeah.
So once again, thank you so much for joining us, guys. I thank Tim and David for being here and explaining all this stuff. If you had questions, I hope that we answered them adequately. If you do have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us via the website. We can always respond to you guys, always get to the answers that you need. If you see this roadmap that we're looking at now and there's something that you'd really like to learn about or something that you think that we need to dive deeper into, once again, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know. You can connect with any and all of us on LinkedIn if you'd like to. So with that, we just wrapped up Edgescan 101, which was our intro and why Edgescan. The next time that we'll all be sitting down and hanging out with you guys will be for the development and the roadmap, where we'll be examining the development process and looking to the future with the Edgescan roadmap. Alrighty, thank you so much, Tim. Thank you so much, David. And thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.